Hello, everyone. I'm Shashwat. I'm the CEO and co-founder at P0 Security. And with me today is Bradley, the VP and CISO at Paychex. Hey, Bradley, how are you doing?
I'm great, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'd love to get down into some very interesting topics around identity security with you. But first, I'd love to know, what does identity security even mean to you? What do you think are its big building blocks?
Yeah, when I think about identity security, I think of all of the processes, not only for, provisioning and deprovisioning identities and ensuring that every user has the right entitlements at the right time, but also for ongoing monitoring of the usage of those identities to identify any kind of anomalies or malicious usage of those identities. All that together, I think, is a comprehensive identity security platform.
Makes sense. So from what I gather, you're saying that the various building blocks are monitoring and visibility, as well as provisioning, deprovisioning, and somewhere over there you also mentioned users and machines, right?
Yeah, and it's important that they cover both users and non-human identities.
How do governance and access management for both users and non-human identities improve the security outcome for an organization such as yourself?
Sure. Well, access management, I think, both for human and non-human identities, is foundational to security outcomes. This is, after all, the mechanism that's leveraged to determine what access to resources an identity has within the organization. So excessive entitlements or access to resources creates risks, both in terms of legitimate users being able to make mistakes that have a larger impact than they should, and in terms of the impact an attacker can have by stealing a legitimate identity, whether that's a human or non-human identity. This is why getting identity and access management correct is the first step in implementing a zero trust architecture. You can't limit legitimate access to only the resources an identity should have if the entitlements of that identity are incorrect. So it's also critical to manage the entitlements or access to resources by both human and non-human identities. Most legacy identity and access management solutions can only be used to manage human accounts. However, non-human identities now outnumber human identities by orders of magnitude, and non-human identities like service accounts often have more entitlements or access to resources than humans do. Thus, both of these must be governed and managed well.
If they are not, right, what are the potential risks organizations face if they are not implementing the governance approaches that you're talking about?
Yeah, I think there are several risks organizations face when they don't have a unified identity governance approach. These risks include an elevated probability of suffering a data breach, more outages and downtime, and higher operational costs. And I want to dive into each of those. With a unified identity governance approach, organizations are at a higher risk of suffering a data breach or an outage as a result of having more unused identities, both human and non-human, and more identities, human and non-human, that have excessive privileges, both of which can be leveraged by attackers to gain unauthorized access to their systems. And these organizations have higher operational costs because without a unified approach for managing human and non-human identities, it's difficult to automate provisioning, deprovisioning, entitlement changes, and all the other administrative tasks, and do it consistently regardless of the type of identity or where it resides. You can't manage or govern only a portion of your identities and achieve positive security outcomes. Your approach has to be comprehensive.
Makes sense. Well, that's a big task for any respectable sized organization, right? So my next question is, you've laid out a lot of things that, CISOs such as yourselves need to think about, right? But what should be the path to achieving those? You cannot realistically hope to achieve all of those in one shot, right? So how do you scale an identity governance program?
Yeah, I would say that unfortunately, in addition to being, mostly or entirely focused on managing human identities, kind of the legacy identity governance platforms do a poor job at managing identities, both human and non-human, in public cloud platforms, and that leaves CISOs at organizations that are migrating workloads to public cloud platforms with the Hobson's choice of either trying to extend identity governance platforms not designed for public cloud platforms to them, or adding a cloud native identity governance platform to their arsenal of identity and access management tools and managing two separate solutions. I think the best way of scaling identity governance in such an organization is to kind of replace or augment a legacy identity governance solution with a cloud native identity governance solution that can manage identities both on premises and in public cloud platforms, and that can manage both human and non-human identities. Cloud native identity governance solution also has the advantage of being built on top of auto scalable infrastructure.
Makes sense. So most organizations um, probably have, as you rightly pointed out, some mixture of legacy on-prem as well as more modern cloud-native platforms, right? Where their resources are located. So if, as you suggested, a company should look to augment their legacy identity and access solution with more of a modern cloud-native solution, do you have any thoughts on what sequence of steps they should take as far as the building blocks are concerned? Should they start off with visibility and then layer on, deprovisioning on provisioning? What are the best practices so that the actual project can be completed successfully with a positive ROI?
Yeah, sure. So I'd say that if an organization has already invested in a legacy identity governance platform, they're definitely in a more challenging position than one that has not. They can try to extend that legacy identity governance platform to manage public cloud identities and non-human identities. Unfortunately, most of the legacy identity governance platforms are not designed for managing cloud and non-human identities, so they don't do it well. And as workloads migrate to the public cloud, the solution doesn't scale well, and the organization will be forced to kind of replace the legacy identity governance solution in the long run anyway. So my recommendation is to rip off the Band-Aid by replacing or augmenting that legacy identity governance platform with a cloud native identity governance platform that can manage both
Yeah.
legacy and on-premises identities and both human and non-human identities. And if an organization has not already made an investment in a legacy identity governance platform, this is much easier, as the organization can simply choose to implement that cloud native identity governance platform um, that kind of replaces or that can manage both on premises and human and non-human identities without the hassle of replacing or augmenting that existing system.
Makes sense. Love the up to, straight and up to the point. If you have an old one, just rip and replace it.
Yeah.
Great. Bradley, as always, pleasure talking to you. That was a very informative session. And if any of our viewers want to know more about what we are doing here at P0, as far as helping customers govern identity and access to the cloud for all kinds of identities, please visit our website. Thank you very much for your time, Bradley.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.